Hi, everybody. You're listening to the Oneness Junkie podcast, hosted by me, Lydia Smith, a self-proclaimed Oneness Junkie. Oneness Junkie is a place to be inspired, encouraged, and supported. Learn from the individuals who are working to make the world a better place. Let's meet today's guest. Hello, everyone. It's Lydia with the Oneness Junkie podcast and YouTube channel. And today I'm excited to introduce you to our next guest. You know, guys, I always say that. I'm always excited to introduce you to a guest, and I actually really am. It's very exciting meeting people for the first time. And that's the case today with Mr. Julian Rosser. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Lydia. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for being here. I'm so excited to get to know you better. And as my audience knows, I like to tell y'all whether I know them or not and how I met them. So in this case, I do not know Julian. He was Googling Oneness podcast and he found my podcast. And then he just decided to listen to a little bit of an episode, check it out, see if there was a good personality match. And he reached out to me and he was like, hey, I think I should be on your podcast. And I was like, I think you should be too. So really just basically going with the flow, letting our oneness create the experience that we all have. And so this is fun for me. I was telling Julian that I enjoy not knowing my guests and getting to know them. It's like adds to the element of mystery and surprise. And you know, something I just want to mention this before I let Julian introduce himself, but something that's always been apparent for me is like people go like, what are you into? And I was like, I actually like people. Like I am into people. I love to get to know people. I love to get to know their stories, their journeys, where they've been, what they've been through. Like that is exciting for me. And so this is like a perfect platform for me to bring the people of our world together to come and get other people to get to know people out there doing amazing things. And Julian wrote a book called The One Elephant, and he's going to extend that title for us in a little bit. But basically, it's a book about oneness. And so today we have Julian on the show so we can just talk openly about oneness, and I want to learn what oneness means for him. So Julian, will you take a moment and introduce yourself, and then we'll get into later the conversation about oneness?
Yeah, well, I mean, thanks very much again, Lydia. It's a fantastic topic, oneness, and as we were saying earlier, I don't understand why more people aren't talking about it, because in some ways it encapsulates everything. But I don't know when it was exactly that I got interested in this. I wasn't always interested in spiritual stuff as a young guy. But then at some point I kind of woke up to it, and it's something about the logic of it that appeals to me. It just seems logical. And it was a simple concept. And gradually, as I got more and more interested in spirituality and kind of went through a journey of awakening, you might say, for some reason I always wanted to write a book. And I didn't know what I was going to write about initially, but at some point oneness came up as a topic, and it just kind of went from there. And as we were saying earlier, I think it's a simple concept, but it's something that you can virtually look into infinitely as you develop your understanding and appreciation of it. And of course, there's different interpretations of it from different perspectives. But I'm originally from New Zealand. I was born and bred in New Zealand, which is a long way away. I know not everyone knows where it is. It's a little island in the South Pacific, a couple of islands. And I've lived in Japan for a year. I've spent several years living in London and England. And I now am in LA, California.
What brought you to LA?
Well, I don't know. I always wanted to live in America. And then by good fortune, I married an American. So it kind of worked out that way. But I also, like a lot of New Zealanders, travel and live abroad. And especially in the UK, when I moved over there, I was walking down the street and, going out for a drink at pubs and things and bumping into guys I went to school with, like in my class at school. It was just, there's so many of them there. And but it's not quite the same in LA. But it's good to get out in the world and experience different cultures and understand things. It helps you broaden the mind a lot.
Yeah. So let's move. Thank you for that introduction. And let's move into just the fact that you wrote a book about oneness. And before we started recording the episode, you were telling me that, tell that story that you said that when you were younger and somebody asked you, what are you going to write a book about,
Yeah, and that's what they said, and I oneness was the thing that came to me. I didn't know why, and I didn't really.
But how old were you when you said that?
I'm not sure. I wasn't real young. I must have been, I don't know, maybe 20-ish.
But still, the fact that at 20 years old, you actually had an understanding of, number one, the word. I mean, I never heard the word when I was 20. I didn't hear it till I was 35 or something, 37 maybe. So that's pretty amazing. Were you in New Zealand?
Yeah, I was in New Zealand. I mean, it was around that time that I got interested in spirituality, and I looked into the Eastern spiritual teachings quite a lot, Buddhism and Taoism and things like this. And that kind of concept, whether they use the word oneness specifically or they describe things in different ways, and that's kind of the essence of the book in a way, is that this principle is there in a lot of different teachings from different traditions and things and different points in history, although it may be described in different ways and there may be different detail around it. But it just seemed logical to me right from the get-go, really.
Did you I don't know if you said this in your intro because I was dealing with my microphone, but did you grow up in any kind of particular traditional religion or any religious influence?
Well, New Zealand is not as kind of, I don't know, religious a country as America. I don't know if that's the right way of describing it, but my grandfather was a minister, but he passed on when I was very, very young. And so, I kind of went to schools that had churches on them, and a couple of the schools I went to, and so went to services and things. And so I guess I grew up kind of in a kind of traditional Christian background, but not strongly so.
Your parents weren't necessarily enforcing what you were learning at school. It was just a good school, basically.
Yeah. So it wasn't something that we were really into in a big way.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of when I was at university level around then that I started getting interested in it and, exploring different kind of traditions and things as well.
Okay, cool. That actually brings me up to just understanding, how do you define oneness?
Well, to me, oneness is a belief. Well, oneness to me would be essentially, I think, everything is God. Should we say it that way? Everything is God, and everything is therefore a part of God, and therefore, if everything is a part of God, everything is interconnected to everything else, no matter how good it is or how bad it is or who it is or whether we like the person or whether we dislike the person or whether they have the same beliefs as us or whether they even heard of us. We're all interconnected. And that's everything. And it's not just every person, it's kind of everything, every
planet.
all planets, galaxies, throughout the whole cosmos. Everything is kind of part of this great big oneness. That's kind of how I would describe it.
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, when I was telling you that my concept of oneness has evolved, previously I would have just, and in the beginning when I made the t-shirt, the Oneness Junkie t-shirt, I basically, was saying that I wanted everyone to, it was like a little billboard. So I wanted everyone to understand that we're all connected. So anything that we do to another person actually affects us too. And so the whole concept is to like create more compassion in the world, that everyone matters and everything is purposeful. And whether you're a plant or an ocean or a mountainside or a, fungi or an animal or a human being or a star or a cosmo, like it all matters. And so to disrespect something is like disrespecting the one, the whole. And yes, I do agree. I grew up in a traditional Christian background, Baptist, religion. We went to church all the time. So God, I'm comfortable with God, but I also use the term the creator, because to me, the creator gives God more responsibility, like created all things and everything. And it gives like ownership, God, the creator, created all of this. And I believe that now my evolved level of oneness comes from me being in contact with this book called The Law of One. And like it just showed up to me. And now I'm like in a whole new level of my personal understanding, but that like as human beings, because I've always been seeking, and since I was in my 20s, I've been seeking that other like our purpose in life. Why are we here? Like, what are we supposed to be doing that makes life worth living and matter? Like, so how can we contribute? Right. And so us being more connected to why we're here, and how I understand it is we're here to evolve, to get back to the one. And that's our journey. That's the journey of life, of existence, is for us to continually evolve to love and light. And when we evolve to a more love and light experience and a less distorted experience of God, then we are the expressions of God here on earth. And so that's why we're here, is to love and light people into their personal evolution. That's how I see it. That's how I see my purpose. It's not easy. I was telling my sister this morning, I wasn't love and light when I said that thing to that person the other day, and I was saying,
I know. Yeah, I can relate.
Because I want to be love and light, but I'm not always love and light. But that's my core intention, though. So people out there who come across me, my intention is striving for love and light to all things and all beings. Unfortunately, I don't always express God in everything I do. But it's the journey.
Well,
right?
None of us do. And that's right. None of us do. And that's why we're here, to gain that experience and to evolve and learn through mistakes. But the more we express love, which is really the energy of the cosmos, it's not just an emotion. It is light. Love energy is light energy. It's a thing that you can express. And the more we express this, the more we help other people, because that helps them. But it also it affects us, because we're kind of expressing this energy, and that's kind of lifting us up and changing our vibrations as well. So what appeals to me about that, kind of exactly what you're saying, I might have described it slightly differently, but it's the same principle, is it's just so logical to me. That's what kind of appeals to me. It's like the universe is set up for people to help each other to evolve, and it just works really well. And like, if you work against that, it's just so obviously doomed to fail, because it harms you, it harms someone else, and it just goes down. And eventually everyone has to learn to express love and light. Everyone has to get there sooner or later. And whether we take forever, or whether we can do it in a shorter time, that's entirely up to us. But we're all on this journey. And this is what I like about when I look at the teachings in the East and West, is because the yogis talked about this thing called the great outbreathing and the great inbreathing, which kind of spans these kind of enormous periods of time. Which is essentially the same thing. The great inbreathing is exactly what you're saying. Everyone kind of evolving, all of creation really evolving kind of back to the source, back to God. And we don't really know what that even means. It's such a big kind of concept, but that's kind of really where everything's going. And you're either helping that process by going with it and supporting it and spreading light to help make it happen, or you're working against it if you're harming people. But so it's better to love and to be compassionate and to help others, and that just helps the whole. You're going with the flow. You're going in the right direction rather than going against it.
When you were saying that, you just said it in terms like, and it all works. It all works miraculously. And it does. And you know what our sensors are that help indicate where we're heading? They're called emotions. Those are our sensory feelers out there activated in the world. So when you get triggered or have an emotion of joy or happiness or love or light, you're heading towards the creator. When you have disruption and frustration and irritation and fear and anxiety, you are turned away from the direction of going towards the creator. And so our emotions are our guidance system to help us be aware of what we're expressing to the world and how if we're choosing, we want to be evolving to love and light and back to the creator. Look at our emotions, look at our interactions. And so for me, like, I don't like when I feel like when my intention is love and light, but then I feel fear or anxiety, I'm irritated because I want to be love and light and joy and happiness. I don't want to be frustration, sadness, fear, and anger. And so when I know better, I have to do that redirect. I have to consciously redirect and intend, like, okay, I know this is happening, but I want to be this. So I'm going to choose to speak these powerful words that things are always working out for me, or the universe has my back, or the creator has my back. Like, how do you handle life living in a world of oneness?
Well, I think sometimes if you're trying to do really good things, you do encounter resistance, and I'm sure you've experienced that. And so sometimes, resistance in itself does not necessarily mean you're doing the wrong thing, because you might be trying to like save the world or do something amazing, and you get all these problems that kind of come up, and that can be stressful, that can be depressing, it can be demoralizing. But yeah, you just have to remember what you're trying to do, what the purpose is, and if you have that higher goal, that can inspire you to get through that kind of tough times. But I think anyone on a spiritual journey, anyone who's really who's trying to improve themselves and trying to become more in touch with themselves and more understand God in a greater way, inevitably it is an up and down thing. It's a roller coaster, and you have to. The highs get higher, but the lows sometimes, it can be really tough. We all go through that, and you don't escape that just because you get more
aware.
You get more aware, and sometimes it can be more difficult because it's like you're more sensitive to things, and so you have to, things can affect you more deeply if you see someone else suffering. I mean, I live in Los Angeles now, and when I first got here, like the homelessness, like just blew my mind, seeing all these people living in tents and things. And it's really difficult to kind of grapple with because it's kind of everywhere, and you kind of feel compassion, but at the same time you feel hopeless because there's just so many of them. Like, I mean, where on earth do you start? And so it's you're kind of more sensitive, whereas someone else who doesn't really care about people could just kind of wander around and just it wouldn't affect them. But I think a lot of people, when you actually care about the world, you're more affected by it.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, everyone has their own contributions to the world and their own gifts, and like one of the things I know that always happens in my brain when I see a problem is I want to be a problem solver. So my brain, like, I see the homeless, I'm like, okay, what can we do to fix that? and then as you're talking, I'm just thinking, with all the money in California, how come people don't just band together and like create a tract of land dedicated to housing people so that they're not in tents, but they're in buildings and they're all there? I don't know. Maybe they don't want to be there. Maybe they don't want to be in the homes or whatever. Like, I don't know what people have tried, but it seems like there'd be enough money for people to just say, hey, we want to get them off the street because we don't want to look at it either. You know, like, we don't want to have to look at the tents. We'd rather them be in a home in a bed. So why don't we just afford low-cost housing or something for them?
Yeah, and no one wants to see other people suffering. I think it's like one of these things. There's enough money to solve that problem, and there's enough manpower to solve that problem. I think it's symptomatic of a deeper problem of in society, is which end of the day it comes back to a really simple thing: there's not enough love in the world.
Right.
And I mean, some people might say I'm being too simplistic by saying that. But I think if everyone goes out there and manifests love in their every thought and their every action, then a lot of these problems that we face in the world are just going to fade away, because people are going to be living more in harmony with one another.
Yeah,
and if we're all radiating love energy out through prayers and our actions and things, it's that's the way forward. I think it has to be a spiritual way forward rather than a money kind of thing. It's just spiritual. It's a spiritual work. The whole world really needs to wake up.
It's a spiritual problem, right?
Yeah,
every problem is a spiritual problem, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and imagine if the whole world saw, the world as one, and everyone recognized that, like, this person that we walk past on the street who's living and suffering and living in terrible conditions. If we realize that person is just as near to us, really, as like a family member or spouse or child that we love dearly, and if we recognize them in the same way, we would want to live differently. And in some ways, that's how we are. We're all equally interconnected with the best and with everyone in society. And so that's how we need to live. I know it's philosophical, really, because one person doesn't solve that. But if our collective consciousness changes to seeing the world in that light, these problems are going to become an embarrassing memory of the past.
Right. I'm smiling when you said that, because I'm thinking you're singing to the choir. You're like the people listening to this podcast, and myself included, who understand this message of oneness. Like, I agree with you. I agree with everything that you're saying. And that is the intention of which I created a podcast, to spread a message globally. Like, how can I get this message globally out? I can only do my part. And, when you told me you Googled Oneness podcast and mine came up, I kind of chuckled from a marketing perspective, because I was thinking that's because there's not a whole lot of people who have a wellness podcast, And so when you're talking about how difficult it is, and you go back to your why, when you face challenges and the mission that you're doing, I think about that. Like, I was given this desire for a reason. And so now I'm here to help bring people like you, the conversation up to a higher level. And I say in my intro, y'all, I can't do it alone. It's going to take each and every one of you to understand that we have to do our part to help the world become a better place. It's not one person can't lift the world up. It's everyone has a responsibility in making the world a better place. And is that what your book talks about? Let's talk about your book a little bit.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because there's so much division in the world. I mean, if we think of oneness as being one thing, then what's at the opposite end of the spectrum? Division is not oneness. It's two or multiple. And division is really what I see is the main issue in the world today. It's political, like it's like it's like a nightmare of division in politics. It's like racial division, it's ideological division. In virtually every area of life, we have this kind of division.
Even
Even in
medical.
Yeah, exactly. Especially over the last few years. I mean, it's been crazy, the division that has come out of all of these things, and even especially in spirituality. And if we go back to, my book here, just to give it a plug
No,
there,
read
One
that long.
Elephant.
You said there was a long title. Read the whole thing for
Yeah,
us.
it's called A Spiritual Journey to the Cosmos from the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. And the reason I got interested in the 1893 World's Fair is because there was a thing called the World's Parliament of Religions, which happened then. And it was the first one of these things that at that scale that had ever happened in the world. And it was huge. And there was representatives of all of the Eastern religions and, Christianity and all the different aspects of Christianity and so on were there. And it was this great big coming together of religions to ideally find common ground. And the book takes its name, One Elephant, from this parable that dates back, centuries, which is about these four blind boys and the elephant. I don't know if you've heard this one.
I think there's a poem, but don't they refer to men?
Well, yeah, it's been told in different ways.
Okay, go ahead. Let's see if it's
history.
the same thing.
So you've got these four blind boys, and one of them grabs a hold of this elephant's tail, and he says, "This elephant is long and thin like a snake." And another one puts his hands around its leg, and he says, "No, it's tall and round. It's like a tree trunk." And another one says, he runs his hand along the side of it. He says, "It's like a wall." And the fourth one grabs its ear, and he has a different description as well. So you've got these four boys all giving accurate descriptions of what they're experiencing, yet completely different to one another and apparently in conflict with one another. And really the idea of this is that you could say these four people were representative of the world's religions, all saying, "Hey, God is this, God is this, no, God is this, no, God is this." But essentially they're all just looking at God from different angles, from different points in history, from different levels of education, from different languages, different cultures,
experiences.
And the same. Exactly. And, the same sort of thing you could say if you're looking at the top of a mountain, if you look at it from the north side versus from the south side, it's just going to look different. If it's the same mountain, but until you walk around the mountain and look at it from all sides, you don't really understand it. It might be steep on one side and more a gentle slope on the other. So, it's quite different. And in that parable was related by someone from the Jain tradition at the World Parliament of Religions in 1893. And so that's kind of where I take it from. And Swami Vivekananda, who was representing Hinduism there, gave another analogy, which is similar in that he described the rivers, which is from the Bhagavad Gita, which is an ancient Vedic text. The rivers are all different, but they all go to the same ocean, and they all intermingle their waters in the ocean, although they start from different places. And it's the same principle of essentially everything's different, and we all have different experiences and different perspectives, but at the end, all life is one. Yeah. And so that's really what got me interested in was actually Swami Vivekananda, who was a very brilliant Hindu mystic. And his speech is what drew me to the World Parliament of Religions. And then once I got interested in him, I realized people like Nikola Tesla, who's very famous, he was there. Because that was a part where, I don't know if you've heard that movie, The Battle of the Currents or the Current Wars or something like that. This is where they're deciding whether to go to AC, alternating current, or DC, direct current. And this event was this kind of a turning point in the victory for AC, which is what Tesla was kind of behind. And so he was there, and he actually believed in oneness as well. And various other people. Another great mind who was there was Annie Besant. She was a theosophist, and she was a very, very deep thinker. She originated in the UK, and she was right into social activism. they used to have, and she worked for a variety of people suffering in England in the late 19th century. And then she kind of had a spiritual awakening, and she went into theosophy, which is kind of a mystic view of the world. And they believe in this concept of oneness. And they refer to it, they use the term absolute as a kind of way to define all things, all life and all matter, everything, as being one. And so I kind of went through these different aspects and used people from that historical context to talk about oneness. You've got Max Planck, who was the grandfather of quantum physics. And he said, really, all matter is energy. There's only energy. And a lot of different people throughout history that had, really spiritual views. And just kind of drawing them all together,
and their
all these different perspectives,
right?
Yeah, under this kind of theme, and then taking it out into the cosmos. You've got Edgar Mitchell, one of the Apollo astronauts. He had this, what he described as a kind of awakening out in space, and he's the one who used that expression, "We are stardust," something kind of along those lines. And he just had this kind of really spiritual awakening from his experience in space. I mentioned earlier that travel broadens the mind. Well, I mean, imagine going out into space and looking back at the Earth and seeing all of your problems and your little petty concerns and blah, 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 blah. And they're all just on this tiny little dot. They kind of effectively disappeared. And all you can see is this beautiful sphere of the Mother Earth. It just would give you a totally different perspective on life. We all get caught up in our worries and day-to-day things, but suddenly, you're out in the cosmos, and it just changes your perspective completely.
Yeah. Can I tell a little story right now based on what you just brought up for our conversation? So I'm going to get a little show and tell item. Hold on one second, okay?
Oh, fantastic. Turn around.
We don't know each other, and so this was not planned. So this is based on what you're talking about, okay? So I'm from Houston, Texas, which NASA is down here, the astronauts, all that from the 60s
of course,
and the 70s and everything. And so NASA's always been a part of our growing up because we could just go to the Johnson Space Center and see all the big, place. I mean, it's 45 minutes away, so I grew up in Meyerland. And so you're talking about the cosmos and oneness and all this stuff. And so my dad's passed away, but he was 93 when he died in 2019. And he used to go to garage sales in the 80s. And one time he came up on a garage sale and he was like, "What's this?" And the lady said, "Oh, it's an astronaut's hat." And they're like, "Really? What astronaut?" And it's written on here, Walt Cunningham. It's printed right here. And it's also printed on the backside right here, Walt Cunningham.
Oh, wow.
So this is basically like an astronaut from the 60s hard hat, like walking around NASA. He had to wear a hard hat. I don't think this is the hat he wore in space because it's not a space hat, but it's a hard hat for walking around NASA. And my dad said, "Well, where is the astronaut?" He goes, "It's sitting he's sitting under that tree drinking lemonade." He's like, "Do you think he'll sign it for me if I buy it?" And he's like, "Yeah." And so anyway, Walt Cunningham signed the hat. Okay. So this has been in our life for years, like that was the 80s. And we always heard the story from my dad, like, "Oh, that's an astronaut's hat." Well, I didn't really care. I mean, I was a 15-year-old or whatever. I was like busy living my life. My dad passed away. This is this hat. So I started to do some research because I was like, do I want to sell this hat? Is it worth $1 million? Like, what am I going to do with this hat? That's a story. And so here's the cosmos part of this story. So I basically Googled like the mission that Walt Cunningham was on, and he was basically on Apollo 7, I believe. And that was, Apollo 7. And that was the first time that man was sent to space. And then they came back. There were 3 astronauts, the first Apollo mission with manned spacecraft. And it was the first successful one. Okay. So that's pretty cool. Like, that's neat story. Big deal, right? It was the first. So I thought, oh, that's special. And then I asked Alexa, when was Apollo 7 space launch? And Alexa told me October 11th, 1968. And my heart just sank because that was the day I was born. And so it was just such a connection.
Wow.
It was such a connection, to the cosmos and to like my purpose and like why this hat. I have three sisters, and there's two other people this could have landed in their hands. But the fact that I'm like holding a piece of history that happened on the day that I was born, like the day that I came into this world and my soul came into this world, was the same day that the person who owned this hat was going out into space, into the cosmos. And I just thought that was such a neat connection for me to have this connection to people and places and things that had like nothing to do with me, but maybe they did, right? Like, isn't that an amazing like story to find out that, and by the way, one just little caveat, I emailed him hoping he was still alive. He had a website up in August, and I said, here's my story. My dad got this hat. Here's the pictures. Is this really your signature? And he actually wrote me back within like an hour. He wrote back. He was 90, I think, 1 years old. And he wrote in big red font, yes, Lydia, that you are right. That is my signature. And so I have an email that proves from him. And then he passed away in January. So I basically had contact with him 5 months before he left this earth. And so anyway, isn't that just like an amazing kind of a oneness connected to the universe, like story? Like it could have been 365 days and it happened to be my birthday.
That's exactly right. I was going to say exactly that. It could have been any one of 365 days. And I think, but that's how the universe works. I think there's more of this kind of synchronicity or whatever people want to call it. I think there's more of this that happens around, but people don't actually notice it. But you clicked and you said you did some Googling and you found out when that launch was. But if you hadn't done that, you would have never known. And so you would have had this amazing kind of like synchronicity there sitting there, but you would have been oblivious to it. And I think the more you get into following your life's destiny, if you like, and the more you go in the right way with spreading love and light, the more likely these things are to happen to you. And the more likely you are to recognize them as well.
Yeah. They used to call them, cool. Do you ever see that book called God Winks? And they basically list all these idiosyncrasies or synchronicities of life of famous people that you would know, their stories and stuff. Have you ever heard of that one?
No, I haven't. But I don't think there's any such thing as a coincidence. I mean, these things, it's just... if all life is one, everything's really energy at the end of the day. All is vibration. Things just drawn to one another and connected with one another naturally.
Do you have any stories from your book or anything about your book that you want to let the public know about your book in particular? I mean, you talked about where it kind of got generated, and you talked about Nikola Tesla and all these other things, but is there something in the book that are you just bringing people's awareness to oneness? Like, what is the book?
Well, for me, it's the cosmic aspect, really, which is why it's interesting that you were looking at that book, which was looking at it from a cosmic perspective, and that's why I've got the word cosmos in the subtitle there, because to me, in some ways, from 1893 to this year, which is 130 years, it's the 1st of May is when the World's Fair opened in 1893. So it's almost the 130th anniversary of the event in a few days. And, to me, in some ways, our spiritual understanding of a kind of traditional orthodox kind of way hasn't really kind of evolved in some ways. It's kind of still a bit kind of stuck in its kind of way. But I think more and more we have to look out into the cosmos and understand our position, not just in relation to one another here on Earth, but because in those days, they didn't have the understanding. They didn't have they didn't have a little rover driving around on Mars like we have at the moment. They didn't they were interested in the planets, and they discovered the planets and stuff, but they just didn't have the same appreciation and that we have. So I think what I wanted to take it with this concept is to take it from there and look at things people were saying there spiritually about how we're all interconnected, and just take it out into the cosmos and see it. And that's why I mentioned people like Edgar Mitchell. I also mentioned people like Paramhansa Yogananda. He founded the Self-Realization Fellowship. He was born that year, and he was a very great yogi. He actually has a center here in Los Angeles and many around the world as well. But he really believed in life outside of Earth, life on other planets. It takes different forms. It's all different energies, different levels of vibration that we don't really understand that well, because we're still kind of evolving ourselves, and we don't really understand even life on our own planet, let alone throughout the cosmos, where there must be life in other places. And also Dr. George King, who founded the Ethereal Society, and he was a channel for what he believed were beings from other worlds as well, who also talked about this concept of oneness, interconnectedness, not just here, but throughout the entire cosmos. And even like the Mother Earth being alive, like not just a rock floating in space randomly around this, bright shining sun, but a living being, and the whole of the cosmos alive. And that's, in a nutshell, that's kind of the spirit of what I wanted to get across, because I think that's where we need to go, really, is to recognize that we are all one, and in this cosmic sense.
Yeah. Through our email, I had mentioned to you the book that I had been introduced to through a podcast, like that told you earlier that the podcast just showed up on my phone because I had a Spotify account, and I guess it saw that I was watching the Oneness Junkie podcast, which is my podcast. And so it was feeding me other oneness messages. And so the one, and I know you told me you haven't, read it or been around it yet, but I really feel like this is like a message for you to look for that book, because until I had that book, and I don't have the book, I have the audio, and I'm on second rendition of listening to it again. And I'm seeing and hearing new information that my brain didn't compute, but they talk about Nikola Tesla and how he got the messages that he got to do the work he did, and how it was from the cosmos to give him the insight. And then what the book talks about is that it was meant for good. It was that inspiration from him was meant to light up the world for free, and to allow everyone to use the solar power as a way to take away from you needing to pay the bill of the light bill, and instead to just free up that time to not worrying about the light bill, and you can spend time more in your evolutionary journey. And so when it got into like the wrong hands, the technology, then they are using it to enslave people. And what I mean by enslavement is charging people for power, charging people to have to pay money for power, for electricity and power is what I'm talking about. And so they just talk about all of these things. They talk about how the pyramids were built. They talk about how what Machu Picchu was, what Atlantis was, and like all of these answers about the cosmos, about life on other planets. Like you were right.
Yeah.
There are life on other planets. It's real. It's true. We just don't know it because it's not part of our density or our dimension, but there are different dimensions, and they talk about it's like a spiral. We're going through this evolutionary journey through a spiral heading back to the creator. So it's very fascinating. And I think with all the research you've already done, you will find it like a breath of fresh air, because it actually will, for you, for me, it brought meaning to my understanding that I didn't have words for because I didn't have the history and the knowledge because I never researched it. But it brought the answers that I was curious about, answers of the universe, answers of the creator, answer of God. And they talk about the Bible, they talk about Jesus, they talk about the Bible. It has a lot of good in it, but anytime you hear the Bible say, thou shalt not do this or thou shalt not do that, that's taking away your free will. And that is not of the creator. That is not of the love and light. That's actually from the negative side of polarization and enslavement. So take the Bible with a grain of salt. Take all the good, all the free will stuff, and leave all the enslavement of your personal power out. And then you'll have all the love and light from the creator. But man wrote the Bible. And so man can put his own spin on it.
That's right. And I think this is kind of like a gradual awakening that is happening to the world, is that people are no longer just kind of accepting, okay, well, the Bible was, the Bible's the Bible and that's that. But people are recognizing that, a lot of it, wasn't written when Jesus was alive. It's written from memory. It's been translated many times. We don't know the motives of the translators. You tell a story to someone, they repeat it to someone else. They're not going to tell it the same way you told it. The details are going to be different. And then, especially if they've got a motive, which may want to have some sort of influence over people, as one country, another country, it's just so obvious that it's not going to be literally true. But totally, there's a lot of wonderful wisdom, a lot of truth in there. It's just take it literally at your peril. And I think it's the same with a lot of these texts and things, and that's kind of the message of what I'm getting in this book, is that they all boil down to the same sort of thing. It's like if you take the concept of karma, Jesus is reported in the Bible to have said, as you sow, so shall you reap. And then in the Buddhist tradition, you get this concept of action and reaction are opposite and equal. So and then, you get Justin Timberlake saying, what goes around comes around, So it's the same, I'm not putting those three on the same level, but,
although they might be, they might be, we don't know, right?
Well, I would say that Justin Timberlake's not quite up there. However, I haven't upset any fans there. But the principle of, what you put out, you get back. And it's like you were saying earlier about if you put out love, then, this is, if you put this out, you create this spiral of evolution. It's a positive, constructive, upward spiral versus a downward, negative spiral of negativity. So this principle, which in the East they call karma, that's what Jesus said. And yet, some people would say, well, it's not a Christian kind of thing, but it actually is. It's just described in a different way. And everyone thinks, whatever religion, or even if you're no religion, everyone thinks to some extent that what you put out, you get back. I mean, that's just a basic concept of life. And it's the same true with so many different things in spirituality, I think. They are described in different ways, but essentially they all boil down to the same thing. Even the description of God, it is the same. It's just described differently. It's all one elephant.
Yes. Is it Newton? Okay, help me.
It is Newton.
Newton's
third law of motion.
For every action, there's a reaction, right? I mean, it's science too, right?
Well, Newton was a very spiritual person, but he was talking about that in terms of physics, but he was a very spiritual person as well. So who knows? But
it's all connected.
It is. And it's not just like your physical. He was looking at the physical world, action and reaction, but it's even in how you think and how you express energy. If you express hatred to people versus if you express love and light, you get back what you put out. And if we multiply that by 8 billion people, we can change the world through the power of prayer. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And I like to say on the podcast that when we focus on what our responsibility is, which is working on ourselves, then we are all responsible for changing individually the vibration of the planet. But we have to do it within. in our ecosystem, right, to affect the whole ecosystem. Like we're all little cells of the same body, and
Totally.
so it's our responsibility. So, if you use the analogy of like a human body, when there's cancer cells in there, if you put energy and focus on that, it's going to grow. If you continue to do the same thing that's causing the cancer cells, or if you create the healthy cells, then the body is going to be a healthy cell body. So like you said, Mother Earth is a living, breathing, expanding, growing, evolving thing on its own, but we're all a part of that. So we have our individual contributions. So with that said, this is why I have people like you who've written books, who have resources to help expand individuals who haven't maybe ever thought about things in these terms. And so just remember, like when you were talking earlier, I was just smiling because I was just thinking how everyone has their contribution to the world. And I like to encourage people who listen to the podcast to know that we, the guests, myself, we support everyone finding what is their mission and purpose in their lives, and take action and express that, because that is for you to do. You have a yearning and a desire on purpose because it's yours to do, not me to do or not Julian to do. It's for you to do. So we want to inspire you for you to go take action. Julian had the inspiration to write a book, and so he took action. Did you want to say something? You look like you were waiting for me to stop.
No. I'm totally agreeing with you. I mean, you said we are all responsible, and I mean that's. I mean, I don't mean to just agree with you for the sake of it, but I just do. I can't help it, and that we're all responsible, and that's really what it comes down to, is if we all take action, because we're all one person, so we can't change the world on our own. But if we all play our part as a cell in the greater whole, we can't say, oh, none of the other cells are doing their part, I'm not going to do my part either. It's their problem. I'm not. But so many people, so many people take that approach to life. But if we say, look, it's got to start somewhere. One of these cells has got to start helping the whole. And so no one else is doing it, I'm going to start doing it. And if more people take that kind of approach, the better. And the fact that you're saying responsible, Dr. George King wrote a book, and that was the title, You Are Responsible, which is that it was exactly the situation. You're responsible for the situation, as a whole, that humanity has found ourselves in. Each of us individually, you are responsible for that. But equally so, you are responsible for getting us out of it as well. And so it's up to us, really. We got ourselves here, both individually and collectively. And we're all here to take ourselves out of it as well.
Yeah.
Which is empowering at the end of the day.
Right. And that's why I want to do the podcast, is to help activate and inspire people to just figure out, like, if they feel like, I think a lot of people in the world feel like, oh, I'm not that important. I don't have enough skills. I don't know what to do. I'm never good at anything or whatever. Like, no, erase that. If you have a message inside of you that needs to get out, it's your message, and that's your journey, and that's your part. And I will tell you that I almost believe 100% you are never happier than when you're living your yearnings inside of what your body and your soul and your mind want to express. It doesn't matter what's happening around you, as long as you're expressing what is inside of you that is yours to contribute. It's like the best feeling. Would you agree, Julian?
Yeah, and if you can align that, with helping others, because that's what you're doing with this. You're loving what you're doing, but it's essentially you're trying to spread light, and as you mentioned earlier, I think raise vibrations, raise consciousness, these kind of things. So you're actually helping other people, and really, there's nothing better than helping other people, because when you leave this life at the end, you can't take money, you can't take fame, you can't take cars. But what you can take is what you can walk away from is knowing that it's in a better place. Even though it's only a little bit better, maybe, it's nevertheless better for having had you in it, the world. And, if we look at this idea of karma, action and reaction are opposite and equal. When you leave this life, I personally believe, we reincarnate and so on, and continue our journey of evolution. You take the fruits of your good actions. So it's, even from a selfish perspective, from my point of view, it makes sense to help others because you get back what you put out. Selfishness is doomed. That's like, if you're selfish, then only everyone else will be selfish to you. So it's only logical to work in the interests of the whole.
Yes, it's perfect. And like I said, that book, The Law of One, talks about like our main purpose is to help others. Like that is why we're here. And our journey is to learn that it's not a focus on self, but a focus on helping others. So you just got to figure out who are the others in your lifetime that you want to help. Some people, like my mom, she's 87 and she works with little 2 and 3-year-olds. That is her joy. She loves doing it. So everyone has to figure out where their contribution is to help others and then just go do it. Right, Julian?
Yeah, that's right. And if they don't know, one way they can start is, like you said, spreading love and light. I mean, you can literally do that. You can visualize light flooding out like you're like a beacon of light. It's literally light.
When you're going
and you
to
can visualize white light going to people. Yeah.
When you're going to the grocery store, going to the gas tank, going to the gym, just start there. Be the love and light. Open the door for the person in front of you or behind you, or just find ways to give to others and surprise them. The joy that they give back to you out of their surprise that you did something nice to them is like, makes your day, right?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, oh my gosh, what a wonderful conversation. Now, if you want to find more about Julian, go to oneelephant.net, O-N-E elephant.net. And are there other places do you have a YouTube or social media that they can find you?
Well, I'm just getting started on that. So, but this book, that website is a good place to start. And
okay. Yeah. And that'll connect you as you add new places to connect. Yeah. Well, share his message. You can share this link to this podcast via YouTube or Spotify or Amazon or Apple. And I just thank you. I hope we stay in touch. Well, when you get your social media, we'll have to get connected. And I wish you all the best. I appreciate your time today. Is there anything you want to share before we say goodbye to the audience?
No, thanks very much for having me on the show, Lydia. I think it's a great message that you're putting out there. And I hope you continue pushing it out and going from strength to strength.
Me too. I am hanging in there. It's been a year and a half or so. So it's like, what's cool though, is like new people keep showing up, and it makes it, by the way, like anyone listening to this that thinks they want to be a guest, email me if you have a positive message and a story to tell about how you transformed your life or how you want to make the world a better place. I want to talk about that. I want to inspire others. The whole point is to help other people realize, like, average people like you and me can just be out there living our love and light and changing the vibration of the planet. So please reach out to me if you think you want to be a guest, you want to have a conversation. Let's look at it and see if it's a good fit for the podcast. And so it's about getting people's stories out and getting people's messages out. And as long as the intention is to help inspire others and or raise the vibration of our conversation in the planet, then it's a match. So I'm willing to do that. So let's get that message out. So thank you, Julian. We'll say goodbye for now, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. We've reached the end of this episode. If you'd like to continue with this inspirational journey, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. If you're a self-proclaimed oneness junkie, get yourself a t-shirt and spread the message of oneness in your community. And finally, if you have a story to share or know someone that should be a guest on this podcast, contact us at onenessjunkie.com. See you next time. And remember, when we heal ourselves, we heal the world. Compassion starts with you and me.